Not a single Nepalese Gurkha will be joining the Indian Army in 2023. The communist government in Nepal has decided not to allow the 1,300-odd Gorkhas who joined the Indian Army annually to be recruited. The predicament has been the newly launched 4-year service Agnipath Fire Warriors scheme of the Indian Army. But another chilling effect could be waiting in the already frosty Indo-Nepalese ties. Communist China, which has long been intrigued by the motivation behind Nepalese youth joining the Indian Army, may seek the communist government in Nepal to allow the Gorkhas to join the People's Liberation Army (PLA). This is an apparent effort by China, which under the Mao Zedong plan wanted to gobble up Nepal as one of the 5 fingers of occupied Tibet to exploit the communist government in Nepal to create an anti-India sentiment in the Himalayan nation. Gorkha, respected globally as the fiercest soldier, has been recruited in the Indian Army and earlier in the British Army since 1815. The British had raised the Gorkha regiments, and they fought bravely in various military expeditions. Later on, after the independence in 1947, the Indian Army retained 6 regiments of Gorkha soldiers while 4 went to the British Army as part of a tripartite agreement between India, Nepal, and the UK. Indian Army no more lucrative. In 1947, Pakistan was also said to have staked claim to Gorkha regiments, but Nepal did not consent to it. In fact, after the 1962 war with India, the PLA also requested Nepal Gurkha soldiers, but Nepal turned the request down. The centuries-old link is now under duress owing to the new recruitment scheme of the Indian Army launched in 2022. Under the new scheme, the Indian government has drastically altered the recruitment procedure to cut down the burgeoning pension bill and simultaneously make the forces younger and leaner. The new scheme entails catching the recruits young, conducting a part of their training on the job, and retiring 3/4 of the batch after 4 years without any pension but with a compensation package. The Indian Army has been lucrative for the Nepalese youth as the payment has been 2.5 times of what the Nepalese Army pays, and the pension provides economic and social security. The job in the Indian Army also provides Nepalese nationals with the option to settle down in India. But Agnipath changes that. There are 7 Gorkha regiments in the Indian Army, with 40 battalions and a total of 40,000 soldiers, but only 1/4 of them are of Nepalese origin. There are 126,000 Gurkha pensioners of the Indian Army in Nepal, and there is an Indian ex-serviceman welfare organization in Nepal working for retired army personnel. Salaries and pensions of the Indian Army Gorkha soldiers form a significant part of income in rural Nepal. The Nepalese soldiers in the Indian Army bring $620 million US in remuneration, while Nepal's defense budget is $420 million US. Communist Nepal halts Gurkha soldiers from serving Indian Army. The Nepalese government, led by the communists who are against Nepalese Gorkhas serving in Indian Army historically, halted the recruitment process using the refusal by the Indian government to make an exception for the Gorkha soldiers under the Agnipath scheme. The Indian establishment has been hoping that the recruitment process will commence once elections are over in Nepal, but still there has been no movement. I really hope that the Nepal government will take a favorable view on it and start the recruitment process, Lieutenant General D.S. Huda, retired, said. The recruitment is mutually beneficial as it gives them employment, and the Gorkha veterans act as goodwill ambassadors between the two countries, Huda said. The officer, belonging to the 4 Quarters Gorkha regiment, also emphasized that the recruitment halt will not affect the preparedness of the Indian Army, which has Gorkha regiments drawing troops from both India and Nepal. The vacancies will now be filled with Indian Gorkhas only. This is going to be a massive loss for the Nepalese youth. The only other official government-to-government employment, besides being soldiers in the British and Indian armies, available for the Nepalese youth is to work for the Singapore police. China will not shy from exploiting the situation. The Gorkha soldiers have proved their mettle in the various wars India fought in 1947-48, 1965 and 1971 against Pakistan and the one against China in 1962. And an intrigued China funded a study in 2020 to find out what drives the Nepalese youth to join the Indian Army. As the Maoists in Nepal got a say in the government process, the clamor against Nepalese youth joining the Indian army has been rising. There have been demands that India should not post Nepalese Gorkha against China if there is a war. As the Maoist chief and new Prime Minister of Nepal, Pushpa Kamal Dahal Prachanda, visits India this month, it will be an important issue. The presence of a communist government in Nepal has also bolstered China to make inroads into the country. China may jump in to recruit Gurkha soldiers. Rumors are rife about China exploring options to recruit Gorkhas in its rank and file, but it remains to be seen if Nepal is ready to take the drastic step. The relationship between India and Nepal has been rolling downhill in the last decade. The India-backed economic blockade of Nepal has further pushed it towards China to counter its dependence on the former. China has been quick to step up. Former Indian Foreign Secretary and Ambassador to China Vijay Gokhale said in a research paper, China has three objectives. First, to deepen political and economic integration with Nepal, to erode its dependence on India and minimize the United States' ability to threaten China's security in Tibet. Second, to turn Nepal into a transit station for commerce into South Asia or as a buffer where China expects to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity if needed, depending on how relations with India evolve in the decades ahead. Third, to create a Sino-centric order in South Asia because it knows it cannot harbor ambitions to become a global hegemon unless it fully controls its periphery. The Himalayan nation is important to China to secure its southwestern border from India and neutralize the US presence in the country. Nepal has been touted as necessary for the US Indo-Pacific strategy. Chinese writings claim that the United States is infiltrating Nepal to turn it into a high-altitude scientific and military monitoring base. The past overtures by China for Gorkha soldiers have been rebuffed. However, the ongoing imbroglio and the presence of a favorable dispensation in Nepal paves the way for brave Gurkha soldiers, with a history of 200 years of gallantry, into the PLA.